performing the work, they're not looking at my numbers. So in this type of contract, once we agree to $100,000, now keep in mind, I came in at $100,000 and I won the contract, which means you came in at $104,000 and you came in at $106,000. So the government has already deemed me competitive among players in the market. Not players, players, but you know, like in the market, they've come up with us as being the best provider. Because we all had the same set of requirements and we could all figure out what our bottom line price was, and mine came in the lowest, and so they picked me. So once that happens, they really don't get involved in my costs because they evaluated me at a price analysis perspective. They analyzed me on the final bottom line price. You be okay?
I'm just afraid then they're going to come back and say, well, maybe you didn't plan properly, or, you know what I'm saying? Because it just seems to me like everything we have to be precise and we have to be consistent and everything's got its own kind of thing. But like then if we come ahead and the government's like, oh, you said it'd be $100,000 and it only took $80,000 to get the job done.
Right, so you don't go in and brag to the
Right.
government and say, hey, guess what? It only cost us $80,000.
So I mean, is it kind of one of
You
those?
are an effective contractor because you got the job done in $100,000. That's all they care about. In a firm fixed price.
Price and high worksheet.
Go check your tax returns, they'll figure it out soon.
So they put, I mean, but basically what they're doing here is, because the requirements are so specific, it's basically letting you lead your own project. And you know yourself, as a manager, you have in your head, you know, when you think about, your boss comes to you and say, how long is it going to take you to do this job? And you think to yourself, well, I got, you know, Bob over here who's just slow as molasses, but I got Susie over here who's just, you know, like a lightning rod. And you sort of kind of muddle those two together to figure out what the average is going to be, and then you say, okay, I need this number of hours, and it's going to cost you this much. Well, the fact of the matter is, you know, maybe Susie ends up doing most of the project, so it gets up done really quick. Alternatively, Joe, you know, takes a really long time, and it takes you many more dollars. So that happens in your business normally. In a firm fixed price contract, because the government, you have all the responsibility, because if it's not right, they're going to come back to you to fix it. So as long as their requirements are being met, that's all they care about, because it's you're at risk. Okay, now let's talk about the difference. So in a cost reimbursable contract, what happens is, so this is the scenario where the program manager goes to the contracting officer and says, I have a contract, I need a contract in place to be able to provide some goods and services. And the contracting officer says, okay, what exactly do you need? You know, I'm not really sure. I know I'm going to need system engineering hours, and I know I'm going to need development hours. I know I'm going to need this, I know I'm going to need that. But I have no idea at this moment, because I'm trying to provide these products and services for like 30 sites across the United States, and I don't know exactly what Wyoming needs at this point. So when it's those wishy-washy kind of requirements, which happen a lot in the government, because the government's not always sure. You know, if we get attacked, we're in a whole new level, right? So they're never really quite sure what the requirements are. So in some cases. So in this case, what happens is the government doesn't put a firm fixed price contract in place, because if you were a contractor, would you step up to these wishy-washy requirements? How would you price it? You know, how many hours would you put in? You have no idea, because you don't. The government doesn't know. You sure as heck don't know, right? So instead, what they do is they say, okay, let's put. You said you're going to need engineers. Let's put some engineering labor categories in place. You said you're going to need manufacturing. Let's put some manufacturing hours in place. You said you're going to need some computers. Let's put some computers on the contract. And basically, what the contractor is giving you is a price for each of those items that you've asked for. So it's not a fixed price bottom line contract, it's a list of all the products and services to meet their requirements. So in this case, the government looks at our rates and they negotiate labor rates for each type of work that needs to be performed. So sometimes the government will say, we need an engineer level 1. An engineer level 1 has to have a college degree and has to have been working in the field for 1 to 5 years. Am I keeping you
Sorry.
for 1 to 5 years. And you might call that a junior engineer. The government's calling it a engineer 1. So you do this mapping that says what you've asked for, government, for your engineer 1, that's the same as our junior engineer, and the rate for that is, you know, $50 an hour. And so you identify everything that they're asking for, who in your company or within your subcontractor community, to come up with those labor rates. After contract award, so now they've looked at your rates and they've deemed you to be fair and reasonable. We'll talk about that in a second. But they've accepted you. So now what's on your contract is a list of all these different labor rates. So now the government has an actual requirement in Wyoming. And they know exactly what they need to have done in Wyoming. So they write that up as a task order. And they send that out to you. And typically in a cost reimbursable contract, sometimes they'll have, it's called a multiple award schedule, meaning they won't just have one winner, they'll have multiple winners. Because the requirement is so large and so fluctuating that they don't think one company can do all the work. So let's say, for example, you're a small business, you want a cost reimbursable contract, and Wyoming hits, and Kansas hits, and Kentucky hits, and Tennessee hits. And you don't have the labor to provide all 4 of those, work for all 4 of those. So that's why they'll bring in, at the original award, they make it to multiple vendors. So the government issues a task order to all those 4 vendors that won, and they say, we've got this requirement in Wyoming. What you do as a winner is you go through your labor categories that you bid, and you say, I need this many of category A, I need this many of category B, this many hours of category C, and so on. And you add all those together, and you submit that as a task order proposal to the government for Wyoming. And the government evaluates your proposal against your bidders, your other company's proposals, they make an award decision. Sometimes it's flat out a cost shootout. Sometimes it's, wait a minute, I just awarded this contract to company B. I'm going to award this contract to company A so that I spread out the work evenly, that kind of thing. So then they issue a task order. You respond back with your best estimate. Notice I didn't say your best estimate, okay? Firm fixed price, you had to be accurate, right? Because if you weren't accurate, you were going to lose. You're either going to be out of the competitive range, or they were going to, your price is going to be too high, or your price is going to be too low. So you had to be really accurate with your fixed price. In a cost reimbursable, they're telling you what the work is, and you're giving them your best estimate of how many hours it's going to take. And the profit percentage is identified at this point and converted into a profit pool. Okay. So the way this works is, you have an engineer 1, 2, and 3, and you're charging them $100, $125, and $150 per hour. Okay? So the government gives you the task order, and when they give you the task order requirements, you convert each one of these to, I need 6 of these hours, and so it's $600. And you figure out how many hours you need for each of these, and you figure out what the price is, you add it all together, and that becomes your total cost, right? This is what you're going to start with. Once you figure out what that total cost is of all the different labor categories you need to do this work, this task order work, you convert it into the total cost, and then you negotiate with the government what your profit margin should be. And the government has a handbook for how, or it's a subset of a handbook that tells them how much profit they should allow based on how much risk you're taking in this contract. So let's say you negotiate, you get the full 10%, you add the 10% of your total cost. So let's say your total cost comes up to $10,000 and you have a 10% profit margin. What would your profit be? $1,000, right? And so your contract value for this task order would be $11,000. The point is that once this initial calculation is done, based on your best estimates as how much it's going to cost, once this 10% profit margin is negotiated, it immediately gets converted to a dollar value. And that dollar value doesn't change no matter what. So now let's walk through the scenario. Let's say that you told the government it's going to take, let's just say 100 hours or 1,000 hours to get this work done. And you start doing the work and you get it done in 850 hours. How much is the government going to pay you for? How many hours is the government going to pay you for? Huh? 850, because they're going to pay you what you actually work. How much profit are you going to get on 850 hours? Huh? No. How much?
About 8.5.
How much are you going to get?
$1,000.
$1,000. Because it automatically gets converted to that dollar amount. And that's what you get. So you get $1,000 profit on 850 hours. But let's take it on the other side. It doesn't take you 1,000 hours to do it. It takes you 1,100 hours to do it. So now, what's the government going to pay you for? Hmm?
$1,100.
They're going to pay you for 1,100 hours. Because that's what you worked. What are they going to give? How much profit are they going to give you? 1,000. Is that still a 10% profit margin? No. So you see, and why do you think the government does that way? Does it that way? Think about it.
So people won't just keep padding it, taking forever and a day to get it done.
Because if they keep giving you 10% on whatever your total number of hours is, it's an incentive for you to keep putting more and more work into this. So that's the way the government curtails you when it comes to cost reimbursable type contracts. Now, let's say, so what they require in a cost reimbursable contract is contractor, if you say it's going to be 1,000 hours, you keep working until you get to the 75% mark. When you use up 75% of the hours, we just want you to notify us. What do you think the government's going to do at that point?
See where you are in the process.
Right? They're going to look at what the whole statement of work was and how far along you are. So they could say at the 75% mark, hey, we just don't think you're ever going to get there, and terminate you, in which case that's the end of it. You still get your profit because that was agreed to ahead of time. Or they could say to you, yeah, you're making really great strides and this is bigger than what both of us thought. So you keep working and we're going to find some additional funding for you to be able to do this work. Doesn't say anything about your profit margin. Your profit margin still stays as is, but they're going to find other hours to pay you for your cost. So in a cost reimbursable contract, you always get paid for your cost. In a firm fixed price contract, you always get paid for your cost? Not if you underestimate it. So the contractor responds with their best estimate to this task order request with the number of hours and labor categories needed to perform the work. Profit percentage is determined at this point is converted into a profit pool, which we talked about. If the contractor underbids, the government may decide to add additional hours. Contractor's costs are always paid, but the profit pool stays the same. It may have started off as a 10% profit, but now that 10% profit is spread over a larger cost base, so it may end up going down to an 8% profit or 7% profit. And the reason why the government doesn't allow the profit pool to change with more hours is because they don't want to incentivize you to take longer. Everybody good? Okay. So in a firm fixed price contract, the government cares, the government cares if you are providing the necessary products and services on the contract. So they ask for these specific things, and as long as you're providing these specific things, you're good to go. One of the problems that we'll talk about when we start talking about contract performance is you have to start providing the level of service from day one of the contract to the end date of the contract. So let's think about this. It's a 5-year contract, and you win the contract, and the government says, okay, you start next Friday. And you're like, oh my God, we won this contract. We're going to start next Friday. and you take all your existing resources to put it on the contract, but maybe you don't have enough people to do this, and you have to hire. So every day that you're not providing that level of service, you're not meeting the contractual obligations. So remember the first day of class, I said, if you really want to get into government business quickly, just go look at some of your prime contractors and see what they have available on their job boards. Because every day, those jobs are on their job boards for government contracts, they are losing money. So they're highly incentivized to get those positions hired quickly, as opposed to if it was an overhead position. Because the longer they delay in taking on an overhead position, the more money they save, right? Because that is an indirect cost to them. And you know, they know how we are as humans, right? If you leave tomorrow and I have to do your work, okay, it's okay for a day or two, and the government, I mean, the company knows I'll probably do it for a while to, you know, just keep things going. But then it's just going to get to a breaking point where I can't do two people's worth of jobs. So the companies know that when it comes to overhead positions. But these positions are generating revenue for the company. That's why they want to get them filled as quickly as possible. So if you're providing exactly what the government's asking for, there's no problem. They are good. If you're not on a firm fixed price contract, they'll issue you a cure notice. And they'll say, basically, you have X number of days, 10 days, to get this problem fixed. And if you don't get this problem fixed, we're going to escalate this to a termination for default proceeding. So in a firm fixed price contract, you have to very quickly get yourself up and running, and you have to provide the same level of service from day one to the end date of the contract. The other problem that comes in is, let's say it's a 5-year contract, and everybody on your contract knows it's a 5-year contract. And now it's year 4.5, so the government is starting up their recompete process, and you don't know whether you're going to win the recompete or not win the recompete. And what does that make the people on your team feel? Anxious, right? And what do people do when they're anxious in that situation?
Not performing well.
Not perform as well, what else might they do?
Cut corners.
Start looking at the competition.
Hey Joe, you got a job over there? Right? They start bolting. And so as a federal contractor having a firm fixed price contract, you have to make sure you keep your people on staff to be able to perform the work until the very last day of the contract. Because, you know, it could be 3 days before contract close, and you have done a fabulous job for 4 years and 362 days, and now all of a sudden they're going to terminate you for default. Do we answer this?
No, that's actually facts on, so
Okay.
it should go to the facts.
So like I've been on contracts where they've actually paid incentive bonuses to keep us till the very end, or they've guaranteed us jobs after this contract is over if we didn't win it. In a cost and reimbursement contract, the government cares about every cost you incur, because now it's going to drive how much they're paying for your products or services. So they're going to analyze your invoices to ensure if all of your costs are fair and reasonable, reasonable, allocable, and allowable. We'll talk about that in a second. So just to tell you the difference in invoicing to your question. In a firm fixed price contract, if we agree to $11,000, I'm going to probably invoice you $1,000 every month for 11 months. And all I'm going to say is, under firm fixed price contract, here's my charge. In a cost reimbursable contract, what I have to do is I have to say, this many hours, here are all the timesheets of the people who worked for you this month. Here's how many hours, you know, Joe put in, Sally put in, Susie put in. And here are their labor rates, and here's the invoice. And oh, by the way, in order to get this, these computers working, we had to go off and buy, 10 cables, and each cable was X amount, and here's the invoice for the cable, and whatever else we needed. So the government's going to look at every single cost to make sure that it's these things. And we'll talk about that in a second. So when does the government perform cost audits? So the government conducts cost audits by contracting officers routinely on contracts. So every time you submit an invoice, they're gonna basically audit